Gustavo Perednik, an author and lecturer emeritus at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Professor Perednik is a best-selling author both in Spanish and English, and you can verify this by getting into the web with Amazon books.
Can I turn to you, Professor Perednik?
It's a real pleasure to be with you at the Hudson Institute for the first time. Thank you, Jaime Darnbloom, for the invitation. Thank you, Dan Meyershin and the B'nai B'rith. Thank you, Chris, for the moderation. It's an honor to be with Ruth and Hector, and thank you for coming. Hector had put the emphasis on the Argentinian political process, and that's one part of the title of our presentation. The second part is anti-Semitism. I'm going to stress that part in my presentation. And allow me to change the word. I prefer in my books the word Judeophobia rather than anti-Semitism, and I don't think it's only because anti-Semitism is kind of a misnomer. There are no Semites, and there have never been anti-Semites on earth, people who are against the Semites. But if it's just a wrong word, it doesn't matter. I think that here is more than that. We are misdiagnosing what Judeophobia is. Judeophobia and anti-Semitism are synonyms, but I prefer one. And why do I think this? Because once I had a very, very clever Chinese student at the Hebrew University, and I told him that China was time and again presented as the only example of country where never, ever, ever Judeophobia set a foot on. It's quite true. And his answer was astonishing, because he said, well, but you know, it'll happen quite soon, because we are looking towards Europe. We want to imitate Europe's progress. We want to include Europeans' achievements into the new state of China. And when we bring this European CD into our society, it'll come with a virus. The virus is there. The Judeophobic virus, which is an European disease. And I would like to stress this in order to explain what I mean by this. Judeophobia is a European invention. It was exported, and it's still exported to the other continents with more or less success. But it was part of the European ideology since the 14th century, and it's still there. Why? Because when I talk about Judeophobia, I don't mean, and this is the misdiagnosis of it, a discriminatory process, a phenomenon of discriminating Jews. Discrimination happens in other group hatreds, and it stems out of despise. I don't want these people with us. I don't like how they look. I think they're poisoning my society, whatsoever. This has nothing to do with the uniqueness of Judeophobia. Judeophobia is not a discriminatory phenomenon, it is a demonizing phenomenon. And as such, if we don't grasp this essential difference, we won't be ever able to confront it. We'll have many congresses, many conferences, many lectures, many books written about it, but nothing will change the situation until we don't define exactly what type of phenomenon it is. Why are we confused about Judeophobia? Because many of the aspects of discrimination, of hatred of the foreigner, or dislike of someone who is different from me, of plain bigotry, many of those aspects are present in Judeophobia as well. And therefore, we get confused. There is a Judeophobia in Madison Grant's book of 1916 in America, The Passing of the Great Race, in which he accuses the Jews of mongrelizing the nation. But he could have accused African Americans of the same, any foreigner. If you just accuse someone out of a preconception, the Jews are all misers, the Jews have all big noses, it really doesn't matter, because it's not deep. No one will kill anyone because he's a miser or because he has a big nose, even if all of them do. But you won't kill them for that. But if the mythology you create against a group is that they kill God, that they are a satanic people, that they are a powerful people who control the world, and that they have to be stopped, then you would kill them as soon as law allows you to do it, as soon as culture encourages you to do it. And that is why, when you talk about Judeophobia, it's the only group hatred that can attack the target of the group even when he's not there. You don't need any Jew to be Judeophobic. Most Judeophobes never saw a Jew in their lives, because it is what they attack is this demonized creature that exists in their mind. You cannot be a xenophobe without foreigners. You cannot be a misogynist if they're not women. You cannot be a racist if in a society you have people of exactly the same color. But you can, and you are, a Judeophobe even when Jews are not there, if you use this mythology of centuries in which hundreds of millions of people believed in it in Europe and became the source of this hatred. And therefore, Judeophobia in the sense of the beginning of the 20th century in America, in the Americas, such as the restrictive act of immigration of 1924, which was mainly against the immigration of Jews, is very close to xenophobic feelings. It has nothing different, it has nothing to be stressed. But when you start demonizing the Jews, they are not only different and I don't want them to be there or close or to get married with my children, but they are the source of evil, as Mikis Theodorakis, this well-known Greek composer, called the Jews once. The source of evil, well, you know what you have to do with the source of evil. In that sense, Argentina is the champion of Judeophobia in the Americas, because there is a Judeophobia in Argentina in the first sense, dislike of the immigrant at the very beginning, but the demonizing process started with a novel published in 1891 in the main newspaper of Argentina. It is still the main newspaper, La Nación, and there the author Julián Martel published a novel called La Bolsa, the stock exchange. What is so peculiar about this stock exchange? Julián Martel attacks the Jews for being the ones who are behind the collapse of the stock exchange in Buenos Aires a few years before. Curiously enough, there were no Jews, but he could do it. Why? Because he verbatim quotes from a book written 5 years before in France, La France Juive, the Jewish France by Edouard Drumont, and he quotes from there why the Jews control everything without even being in the country. And therefore this demonization starts in Argentina, and not surprisingly, it is the most European-looking country of the Americas, always looking to Paris or to London, it depends what times, more than what they look to the north, as in the rest of the Latin American countries. And therefore, Judeophobia was there from the beginning in the demonizing aspect of this, and it speaks, its ups and downs, till the Tacuara organization, I'm jumping in the mid-1960s. And why is it important to bring this example out of so many? Because here you have an example of a group who's basically fascist, spiritually led by a very well-known priest of those times, Julio Mainbil. And this group killed Jews, tortured Jews just for being Jews, but afterwards became part of it the main source of the left-wing side of the Peronist party, which was quoted before by Hector, called the Montoneros, the guerrilla organization which fought mainly democratic governments, not only, but also the dictatorship in Argentina. And this Montoneros group had many of the people who had before led the Tacuara fascist organization. And it's extremely actual because nowadays the intellectual side of the Kirchner government, 12 years in power, is basically conformed by these youngsters who were before Montoneros or whose parents were the Montoneros, and now it's called La Cámpora. This is the youth group that inspires, that gives the ministers to the present government, and which was embedded in this satanic description of who the Jews are. Now, does that mean that the Argentinian government is Judophobic? And the answer is no. The expressions of this demonization were they were absent in the Argentinian discourse. But I knew, having researched the subject, that at some point they would appear. And that is why I'm trying to present now. The peak of Argentinian Judeophobia was, of course, the terror attack against the Israeli embassy in 1992, the Jewish Community Center in 1994, 86 or 85 people murdered, hundreds maimed, wounded. And this is a new type of attack because although I said it's mainly European, the inspiration, now it comes recycled in a Muslim motif and in a left-wing description that work together. In Latin America, thanks to the government of Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, who blended this motif of Islamic Judeophobia together with left-wing presentation and starting demonizing the Jews and the State of Israel. Let me present the facts that led to the AMIA bombing and to Alberto Nisman's murder. It all started in 1979, January, when the Islamist revolution took over in Iran. This was their first world achievement. Of course, we have to differentiate between the religion of Islam and the Islamist political movement. Islamism as a political movement which attempts to impose the worst face of Islamic religion world over through violence, through terror. It's quite similar to Nazism and communism. The three totalitarian movements that were created more or less in the 20s, 100 years ago, and they spoke one of a superior race, another one of a superior class, the other one of a superior religion. But the main thing is that they were superiors, they had truth, they were going to impose truth on earth by violent means. And that is much closer, brings them much closer to each other than what they bring, the similarities they could have with either world solidarity, German nationalism, or the religion of Islam. The Islamic leaders of Iran, the Islamist leaders, from the beginning said that the Islamist revolution that took place in Iran had to be exported to the rest of the world. They never hid this, and they worked accordingly, sending people abroad, creating dormant cells in many countries that would operate for the Islamic revolution, recruiting Islamic fanatics in different places to try to put them together, to work together. And they started, as I said, sending people to different countries, Central America, Germany. Several were caught, put into prison. And one particularly, in 1984, was sent to Argentina. We are talking about Mohsen Rabbani, which we have a name we have to remember. He was a mastermind of the AMIA bombing. Mohsen Rabbani was sent to Argentina in order to build these dormant cells and to create a network of Islamic fanatics in order to attack the Jewish community. The question is, why Argentina? First of all, they claim in their own written statements that Argentina was a very easy country to get into it and to work and to find allies in the old type of Judeophobes who would be very happy to hurt the Jews. But secondly, they wanted to punish the Argentinian government. In 1989, Carlos Menem came to power in Argentina and decided to change 180 degrees the foreign policy of the country. We don't want to be anymore in the third world. We don't want to be anymore in the non-aligned movement. We want to be in the first world. We'll be the allies of the United States. We want to be welcome to that club. Basically, that was the message of Menem. He was the first Argentinian president to visit Israel. I was one of the people in Israel who received him there. He sent even 2 ships, warships, to the first Gulf War against Saddam Hussein. They were symbolic in their in the way they acted, but it was a very important symbol. Argentina was fighting against a third world populist dictator. And the United States said, welcome to the club on one condition. There were at that moment several agreements between Argentina and Iran for the transmission of nuclear technology. Argentinian nuclear technology to Iran. That has to be stopped. Menem at the beginning said, no problem, we'll suspend these agreements. And then the embassy was blown up in 1992. Menem got very angry and pointed out almost explicitly that he was working against Iran and said, no more deals. It's not that we suspend the agreements, we cancel them. Never again will transfer nuclear technology to Iran. And they put the bomb in the AMIA as a punishment. If you say why, if you wonder why against the Jewish community in Argentina, why if you want to punish the Argentinian president for his pro-Western new policy, you want to hurt precisely the Jews, the answer is very clear. Why not? If you're going to do it, just do it with pleasure. They hated the Jews, they said it very openly, so if they had to put a bomb in Argentina, the best way to kill 2 birds with a stone would be to put the bomb in a Jewish organization. And this was decided in a convention in the Iranian town of Mashhad in August 1983, and it was finally perpetrated in Buenos Aires against the Jewish community. 1 week after the bombing took place, Menem changed his speech from saying, we're going to persecute them till the end, we are going to fight them. He started saying, well, we don't know exactly what happened. There was a slow whitewashing of the whole operation. Iran went to a low profile. No one wanted to confront Iran directly, so they found several Argentinian policemen who were supposedly the perpetrators of the terror attack. And this cover-up almost succeeded. It didn't, because there was a lawyer, a very unknown prosecutor on his way to get into this scenario, almost by chance. Alberto Nisman was invited by one of the prosecutors of the AMIA case in a wedding party to join their team. Would you like to be one of us? We are 2, we'll be 3. Their basic motivation was that Alberto had a long experience in court trials, and they didn't. He knew how to speak on trial. They didn't. So they wanted this expertise. He was only 33 by then, and he came into the picture. At the beginning, it all worked, and the court trial started when people were started to be interrogated. We are in the year 2001 already. And Alberto realized during this court trial that it was a big frame, that no one was saying the truth, that every single contradiction you can find in these so-called witnesses, and therefore he decided, we'll start all over again the investigation. These policemen are very corrupted, but they don't have anything to do with the terror attack. And we'll start from zero. The prosecutors that were with him were finally dismissed. The judge was dismissed, and he remained by himself. 10 years after the attack, he put all the investigation under this UFI, the unit, the prosecution unit of investigation, UFI. He headed this UFI till his assassination with about 30, 40 professionals of the first rate. I knew him personally very closely. He was my friend, and I visited him at the UFI many, many times. And the first fruit of his investigation, I'm going to state 3 stages. I call it in my articles the Nisman trilogy. The first fruit was Iran was behind the terror attack. Not a few Iranians, not radical Iranians. The state of Iran planned it, perpetrated it, brought the suicide bomber and everything. Trained him, gave him passports, whatever. Financed it. This first stage, in a prosecution opinion of 802 pages, was the brilliant first great achievement of Nisman. In my book, To Kill Without a Trace, I novelize this opinion because 802 pages of a legal document are extremely boring. I thought it was a need of the Argentinian society to know details of how he discovered all this, how he investigated, and therefore I wrote this book with his help. But this was only the first stage. Argentina declared that it was true. There was a cover-up. That, on the words of President Kirchner, Nestor Kirchner, the husband, the way that Argentina handled the AMIA case was a national disgrace. We have to change everything from the root. And we did the cover-up. This was admitted. But the triumphant prosecutor was not about to stop. Because in the year 2007, there was another big attempt of a terror attack against the JFK airport. This was planned by someone called Abdul Qadir. He was originally the mayor of the second most important town in Guyana, Linden. After that, he converted to Islam. He became an Islamist. And he was trained and recruited in order to blow up the JFK airport on his way from Caracas, Venezuela, to Iran. There were very fluent flights between Caracas and Iran, not transporting tourists precisely. And this was foiled. He was caught, put in prison in America. What does Nisman have to do with this? Absolutely nothing, unless he can prove that there is some relationship between the attempt of Abdul Qadir and what happened in Argentina several years before, 20 years before. And not 20, 12, 13 years before. And his intuition proved to be truth. Abdul Qadir was the direct disciple of Rabbani. He got orders from Rabbani. Nisman discovered it. This is the second stage. This was his second prosecutory opinion, this time of about 500 pages, in which he proves not only that Iran was behind the Argentinian attacks, but that Iran is the head of a world network of terror, of dormant cells in many countries that are waiting for the moment in order to make a terror attack. 3 months ago, it happened in Montevideo, Uruguay. He was just caught by chance, but he was going to put an Iranian diplomat who was not even punished for it. He was going to put a bomb at the Israeli embassy in Montevideo. And if these dormant cells are really dormant, sleeping, it's only because of Nisman, because he put the focus on investigating Iran. So the Iranians are more careful nowadays of not to operate these cells around. But in any case, this was his second achievement, 2013. Iran was the head of a world terror network, and that put Argentina at the avant-garde of the legal fight against terrorism. Surprisingly enough for Nisman, the Argentinian government was not so happy to discover this. He didn't get much support as he had been given in the previous stage. He felt that something was wrong, and you could see immediately what. That same year, 2013, in January, the Iranian government and Argentina signed a memorandum of understanding in which paragraph Article 3 of this memorandum, Argentina and Iran were going to share all the information related to the investigation. Can you imagine? The victim comes to the murderer and says, now we're going to investigate together. But not only that, I'm going to give you all the information, even who were the Iranians that collaborated with us in the investigation, were going to be given to the Iranian government. A misunderstanding, understatement about this would be Nisman didn't like it. The 7th article of this memorandum says that they have to report immediately to Interpol. This is the only operative article in the memorandum. Why did they have to report to the Interpol? Because this was what Argentina promised Iran. These red alerts against 7 of your citizens will be dropped. We cannot ask for them to be dropped. The Argentinian government says time and again nowadays, we can prove that we never asked these red alerts to be dropped from the Interpol because they didn't have to ask. Once they signed this memorandum, they would be dropped immediately because Interpol can say, as it had said before in another similar case, we are aware that there is an agreement between the two parties. Can you imagine? 2 parties, the bombers and the victims. And since there is an agreement, we'll wait for this commission of truth that's going to investigate the case again. We'll wait for the results until we get this result, that could be 20 or 30 years more. We'll suspend the red alerts. That was planned. Nisman realized that this memorandum was not the beginning of understanding between Argentina and Iran. It was the end of it. The beginning had been signed secretly 2 years before in Aleppo, Syria, by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Timmerman, with his counterpart of Iran. And there they decided to launch a campaign of confusion, of which this Commission of Truth was going to be the main expression. We have to make people think maybe there was an attack, maybe there was not an attack, maybe it was Iran, maybe it was not Iran, nothing is proved. The Argentinian government called this, as Hector said, the AMIA case is paralyzed. There was not such a thing. The AMIA case was solved. Not only was not paralyzed, had been solved. The paralysis was because the Iranian government is still protecting the perpetrators. And that paralysis had nothing to do with the UFIR or with Nisman of Argentina or legal procedure. But they called it, this is paralyzed. So we want to move forward. And what is to move forward? To move towards Iran. The fact is that Argentina had decided that in this new geopolitical situation, we cannot be angry at Iran forever. We have to alienate with Iran. We want Iran to become our clients again. We want them in this treaty oil for wheat. And in this new Chavez-like world in which the only thing you have to do is to fight so-called imperialism, and in order to fight American imperialism, you have to get very good allies, namely Cuba, North Korea, Iran. In this new world, we have to drop this enmity between Argentina and Iran. This is a political decision that is still in process. This was the 3rd and last stage of Nisman. He didn't want to investigate the president, but the investigation of the president came to him, because when he investigated these cells in Argentina, he was flabbergasted to discover that they were in connection with the Argentinian government. He had the tapes, 5,000 hours of tapes. He was going to present the results at the Congress, and he was murdered one day before. I'm going to sum up and finish by saying the following. The Nisman case necessarily brought Judeophobia again as a protagonist of Argentinian society. Why? Not because Nisman was Jewish. So far I tried, and not only me, many people in Argentina tried not to make out of Nisman's case a Jewish case, because he was not murdered because of being Jewish, he was murdered because of his investigation. Had he not been Jewish, he would have been murdered in any case. But the first stage of the government's reaction was to create a feeling that this investigation was a plain lie, that it was just an invention, a fabrication of this deluded guy. The second stage was the character assassination. Nisman was a terrible man. And you can see it. I don't get into details, but it's very well reported. And the third, unavoidable stage was an attack against the Jewish community. Because the Jewish community in Argentina will be the last to accept that the perpetrators of the attack, namely Iran, will be whitewashed. And that is the decision of the Argentinian government to date. And therefore, you have to delegitimize even the Jewish organized community. How did they do it? Hector very well mentioned this Twitter sent, but you said the government. I don't know whether you were trying to be nice to them. It's the president. The Argentinian president sent a Twitter. You say sent a Twitter or sent a tweet?
Send a tweet.
A tweet. She tweeted that the Jewish community organized transcends national sovereignties, and together with the vulture funds and with Nisman and with the American embassy, all together, that's the way they operate in the whole world. Can you imagine? Have you heard about that before? The Jews are operating in the whole world in order to bring the nations to war, each against other, and they have so much power. And I didn't realize before, says the president, but now I realize how they're operating. And she brings what is going to be my last point. Don't worry, Chris. I cannot stop repeating that Judeophobia is a demonizing phenomenon. And if you don't see that, the rest is a minor detail. Whether Jews are not allowed to a club doesn't matter nowadays. They have better clubs. The question is not how they are discriminated. The question is how they are demonized. And the big question is, when they demonize Jews, where do they start from? They don't demonize Jewish religion anymore, or mostly they don't. They don't say that Jews eat Christian blood, to make their matzah for Passover. They don't claim that anymore, basically. And they don't claim that Jewish citizens shouldn't have any more rights, civil rights. That's also passé. Now they demonize the Jewish state. Israel is there. Israel is the worst country. Israel was born in sin. You know that there are 194 countries in the world. 193 never knew wars, were born peacefully, harmoniously, all of them such calm, as you said, tranquilo societies. There's only one country that was born out of war and deceit, and basically these Jewish traits which were absorbed by the Jewish state nowadays. And therefore, if you don't see that the beginning of Judeophobia today is demonizing the Jewish state, and then you can attack the Jews as a whole. If you just feel that, well, we should stop these attacks against Israel because they can become at some point an attack against the Jews are attacked. It's not that they can become. That is Judeophobia today. Judeophobia today is demonizing Israel. This is the main source of it. And I close. The president was a very good example, because she couldn't stop herself from mentioning Israel in this tweet. She says very specifically, in the same way, like Netanyahu spoke in the American Congress, trying to stop peace between the two countries, America and Iran, they work here, like Netanyahu, the Daya works here, trying to stop peace between Argentina and Iran. The world scenario is very discouraging, because there is no force, there is no moral force, there is no Western leader that stands up and says, we have to stop the Iranians, the world terror power, the worst world terror power since Nazism and communism. Since no one wants to stop the Iranians, then the Argentinians can say, we are going to do it. We also have to be in this new geopolitical situation. And that was the sad story that the brave prosecutor, with whom I had the honor to be his friend, paid with his life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Perednik. And I can tell your background as a novelist comes through in two important ways. One, you tell us to pay attention to words, which I think is important, and also you bring the drama to a situation that has a great deal of drama, but tell us the story dramatically. So thank you very much.